You're listening to the Boss Yourself First podcast, Season 3, Episode 6. Is there a moment in your life you secretly carry as proof that you failed? Or worse, that you are a failure, even though nobody else knows it? You ready to let go of that? Let's do it. Welcome back to Boss Yourself First. I'm your host, Robyn White. And this is the podcast where we lead from the inside out with clarity, courage, and a lot of compassion. Hey, friend, listen, I'm so glad you're here today. I want to begin by acknowledging something a little tender, something that it sometimes screams at us and threatens us, and sometimes it just takes up quiet but always present residence in the corners of our minds and hearts. This episode is for anyone who has tried so hard, for years maybe, towards something deeply meaningful and finds themselves staring into a season that looks nothing like what they thought it would be. If that's you, take a deep breath with me. You're not broken, you're not behind, and you haven't failed, at least not in the way that your shame wants you to believe. Today, we're exploring something that, yes, like I said, is tender, but also transformational. It's permission to fail. This is not permission to be careless, but permission to be human, permission to try, to stretch, and yes, sometimes to fall short. And this isn't just a concept in my book. It's a lived experience. In fact, just recently, I was sitting with a client who was just navigating heartbreak on every front. Her child was critically ill, and her partner, out of the blue, it felt like to her, left. And she looked at me and she said, I think I have failed at the most important goal of my life. And maybe you've been there. When failure doesn't just look like an outcome on a data table, it actually feels like an identity, a part of you. And honestly, sometimes it's not the outcome of failure we avoid so much as the feelings that travel with it. Shame whispers, you should have known better. Or you've wasted so much time. Or grief. This just isn't the life you pictured. Listen, these are feelings, and they are not signs of weakness. They are messengers that say you care deeply. You seriously invested. You loved. But here's what I want to offer today. And I realize this will take some intention and some work for some of us to embrace. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a teacher, a catalyst, a fork in the road. And when we engage it through the lens of permission, we don't just survive it, we grow from it. And as this is the season of permission, I invite you to consider failure as the doorway to becoming. And there's both science and soul to support that truth. When we talk about giving ourselves permission to fail, we're not just making peace with imperfection, we're activating our potential. And neuroscience, you know I love it, and it's going to be a part of our podcasts. It tells us that failure triggers our brain's learning chemistry. This is not just the motivational fluff, like, oh, here's the silver lining of failure. But when you fail, your brain releases norepinephrine and acetylcholine, two chemicals that increase alertness. They sharpen focus and they unlock neuroplasticity. And we've talked about that before. That's the ability to rewire and adapt and grow. It's part of our brain's creation. Your brain is literally saying, this matters, pay attention, let's get stronger here. But here's the catch. That same activation can also stir up shame, stress, or the desire to quit, especially if we've been taught that failure is unacceptable. It's not an option. And that's why permission is the switch. Without it, we stay in survival mode. With it, though, we move into learning mode. So remember, in this season of permission, we've talked about the permission principles: approach, adjust, and act. And we're going to apply those here. In fact, we apply that in every permission. It's the same with permission to fail. Let's talk about the approach piece. Remember, we tend to want to avoid failure, but instead, when we have permission, we're approaching how we relate to ourselves in the experience of failure. This is what we're going to approach. This is what where we're going to begin the work. Do we approach it with judgment or with curiosity and compassion? Remember what I just said about our brains and failure. Our brains release a cocktail of norepinephrine and acetylcholine. chemicals that heighten attention and unlock neuroplasticity. So when we approach failure with openness, with the idea that failure is part of learning, a stepping stone, not a stopping place, our brains actually become more teachable, more resilient, and more capable of change. Sounds pretty good, right? But if we approach it with shame, we shut that system down and we lose access to our chemistry, our learning chemistry. That's why approach is a permission principle. It's how we open the door to growth instead of slamming it shut in frustration. It's how we shift from what's wrong with me to what's here for me. What do I need to notice? Approach sets the tone for everything else. So once we've approached with that curiosity and compassion, what's here for me? What do I need to learn? The next principle kicks in, and that's adjust. Adjust is about what we choose to believe. It's how we interpret failure. And here's the truth. Not only does how you approach failure create different chemical reactions in your brain, but also your interpretation informs your brain chemistry. So what does adjust really look like when it comes to failure? It starts with allowing yourself to reframe it. Believe me, I realize this is simple to say and not easy to do, but still, let me explain what it looks like and remind you of why it's important. I'm asking you to adjust what you define as failure and what you are taking that as evidence of. Is failure proof that we're not enough? Or is it feedback that we're still becoming? And this is a common trap I see, especially with high achievers and caregivers, and it is screaming literally for adjustment. When my high achievers experience failure, when they encounter it, I hear this in various forms. What a waste. Was that just all for nothing? Now I have to start over from scratch. And if that's you, hear this. No, it wasn't a waste. And no, you don't have to start from scratch. The effort was not wasted. You built muscles, acquired skills, perspectives, endurance that you didn't have before. You cultivated values that still matter, even if the outcome shifted. I know this reframe is talking mindset, but it's not just mindset. It's brain chemistry in action. Adjustment puts dopamine to work for you. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's a chemical messenger in the brain that plays a key role in the brain's reward system. So motivation, learning, attention, and emotional responses. When we frame setbacks as signs we're moving in the right direction, our brains stay motivated. We keep releasing the chemicals that help us learn and persist. That means we can fail and still be motivated if we adjust our mindset to see failure as part of the progress. But if we interpret that failure as futility, that sunk cost, or personal flaw, effort and characteristics that just can't be changed or have no redeeming aspect, dopamine drops off, and so does our drive. By adjusting, you have permission to say, this isn't the end of the road, it's a lesson on the way. You have permission to ask, what's this here to teach me? Instead of, what's wrong with me? How many of us have said that? Hopefully internally, but sometimes it comes out the mouth too. But shift it. Get intentional, my friends. Adjust that statement to, what's this here to teach me? So let me ask, where might you need to adjust your expectations? Or what story are you telling yourself about what this failure actually means? This is the permission to adjust your inner narrative, not to fake positivity, but to tell a more truthful story. I'm not failing. I'm learning. I'm not failing. I'm adapting. I'm not failing. I'm becoming. Adjust helps us stay in the process when the outcome just isn't clear. All right, let's move on to the final permission principle, and it is, hopefully there's collective speaking going on right now. Act. It is act. Approach, adjust, and act. And this is where theory meets courage, my friends. When we're talking about failure, it's where so many of us freeze. And I realize not everyone experiences failure the same way. Some of us can bounce back quickly, and others of us feel knocked out for days. Why? Well, because failure doesn't just sting us emotionally, it affects our whole nervous system. And there's biology behind this. Our tolerance for failure, our ability to stay in the discomfort without shutting down is shaped by our nervous system, especially the amygdala. And it's influenced by hormones like serotonin and testosterone. But, and I want you to hear this, it's not written in stone. It's not fixed. You can build failure tolerance. So think of it like this. Every time you practice giving yourself permission to fail, you expand your capacity. You increase your tolerance. You train your brain to stay engaged even when things feel hard. When you try again and stumble, you're providing evidence to your nervous system. I can survive this. I can keep going, and my resilience is proof. All right, so I like to have some really applicable pieces, and since we're talking about ACT, I want to give you some actions you can take. And these are permission-based tools. And when I say permission-based, remember that permission in our context is allowing yourself to allocate focus, energy, and intention to something you might either just overlook, it might be on sort of an unconscious level, or you might just find it really uncomfortable and again, long to avoid it. So first, let's talk micro permissions. These are small, low stakes goals that feel safe to try. And some of this may even feel a little silly, but I promise it helps you build up this failure tolerance. If you feel your failure tolerance is particularly low right now, start small, like shooting a basketball. Think about that. Just visualize it. If you're not a basketball player even, you can still picture this. You start really close to the goal. And as you start making more baskets, you increase your distance from the goal. That's kind of how you learn to shoot the ball. Only since you're trying to increase your failure tolerance, you're trying to fail. So start in a place where you're not likely to make the basket. I know this feels counterintuitive, but when you miss, react with kindness, even laughter about the result. Pat yourself on the back for making the attempt. And this doesn't have to be your micro permission. I know that not all of us have easy access to a basketball goal, but the point is not actually the activity. The point is choosing something that you're likely to fail at that has low stakes when it comes to the results. No big deal to fail at it. And maybe you don't see how this can help, but I promise it's an opportunity to approach and adjust your thoughts and your self-talk about failure. This will build your failure tolerance. Try it. You'll see. Another permission tool is permission to rest. And I think we touched on this in the last episode, but after 90 minutes of focus, your brain needs a break to sustain learning. And this doesn't mean you need a nap every 90 minutes, although I'm not opposed. But it does mean change something. Move or sit, eat or drink, go outside or go inside. Change your environment, change your position, change your activity, even just for a few minutes before you ask your brain to refocus. Another tool, permission to breathe, literally. And this, I have to tell you, it's not that I didn't understand that breathing was important, but this particular aspect is relatively new learning for me. I didn't know that how you breathed was important. And particularly here, when we're talking about something we long to avoid or something that we find triggering, we want exhale dominant breathing because it reduces the stress hormones and calms your system. So what does this mean? Exhale dominant breathing means your exhale is longer than your inhale. This breathing pattern activates the parasympathetic nervous system, your body's rest and digest mode, and reduces stress hormones like cortisol. When you exhale slowly and fully, your vagus nerve sends a signal to your brain that says we're safe. And this calms your heart rate, lowers your blood pressure, and helps reduce anxiety and overwhelm. Try this pattern. Inhale gently for 4 seconds and exhale slowly for 6 to 8 seconds. Remember, you want the exhale longer than the inhale. And do this for a couple of minutes. You'll likely feel a little more grounded and centered. And if you want me to walk through a quick breathing practice, it's not quite the same pattern, but it's the same idea. Check the show notes for a link and I will send it your way. So listen, like I said, tender and yet transformational. In the book, I talk about that permission is not a one-time event. It's a practice, a way of relating to yourself that makes space for growth. And permission to fail is what makes everything possible. Because when you take the risk of becoming, of really showing up, you're gonna fail sometimes. But failure doesn't mean you're off course. It means you're on the path of becoming, the path of building, the journey. And the discomfort, that's your brain adapting. That's learning happening. So I want to ask you really gently, kindly, with great compassion, my friends, because when I'm asking you, believe me, I've already asked myself, I'm continuing to ask myself, where are you withholding permission? Where are you waiting until you're guaranteed not to fail before you'll even try? And what would change if you let go of that? Failure only really counts as failure when we stop engaging with it. And until then, it's feedback, it's refinement, it's part of how we find our way. That's why permission to fail is foundational in 3 permissions, because without it, we don't take risks, we don't speak up, we don't try again. All right, let's map it back, our permission principles when it comes to the permission to fail. Approach. Come to your failure with compassion, not condemnation. Adjust. Shift the meaning you're assigning to failure. And act. Move forward. One courageous choice at a time. This is how we fail forward, not perfectly, but powerfully and in alignment with who we're becoming. All right, my friends, here's your permission slip for the week. You are allowed to fail. May I even say encouraged to fail. You're invited to fail. Because failure's not a flaw in your story, it's a feature in your becoming. If today's episode sparks something for you, take one tiny risk this week. Something you've been avoiding because of fear. Take a step, mess it up a little, and notice what you learn. And when you do, I hope you'll remember this. You're not behind. You're not broken. You are becoming. And the journey you're on is sacred, even when it's messy. Listen, I've been getting some questions about how you can join the permission movement, how you can support me and the work we do here on the podcast, and I'll share a few ways of what that could look like. And you do you. Choose your own adventure. All right, join my email list at bossyourselffirst.com. Share your journey with me. I read every post, every message, every email. You're important to me, and I love to hear about your stories. You can find me on Instagram at bossyourselffirst. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can email me at bossyourselffirst.com. Pick up my book, 3 Permissions, and share a review. It gets the word out. It helps people find the book and find the permission movement to join the journey. Also, you can join my book club on Fable. It's BYF Book Club. We're starting a read-along for 3 Permissions on August 15th, and once we're done with that, we're going to continue. We're going to continue our journey together in reading and bossing ourselves first in that format. All right, and then if this episode spoke to you and you'd like to support the Boss Yourself First podcast, there's now a simple way to do it. I've added a support link in the show notes because keeping this podcast going is going to take time, tea, and technology, my friends. So your support helps me keep it going and keep showing up with stories, tools, permission-based encouragement, so we can all keep leading ourselves and each other with kindness, courage, and clarity. If that feels like something you'd like to be a part of, thank you. And honestly, either way, I'm just so grateful you're here. Thank you for listening to today's episode on permission to fail. I think we've made a strong case to no longer classify it as an F word. And thank you for leading yourself, especially through parts that feel uncertain. You've got permission. You've always have. Until next time, my friends, stay kind, stay curious, and keep leading yourself first. Take care, everyone.